The Saffron Robe by Tuesday Love Sang Rampa. Read to you by BlueFriend in beautiful BC. February 2017. Chapter 13. It was good to be back at Shakpori, good to be among those with whom I was familiar. Here the teachers were a dedicated lot, dedicated to training medical lamas. My guide had suggested that I should attend classes for herbs, anatomy, and medicine, as Shakpori was the center for such teaching. With 25 others, boys like me, older boys, one or two young monks from other lamaseries, I sat upon the floor of one of our lecture halls. The Lama teacher was interested in his work and interested in teaching us. "Water," he said. "Water is the key to good health. People do not drink enough to make the body function correctly. One eats, and there is a stodgy mess inside, one that cannot traverse the lengthy path through the intestines. The result is a clogged system, bad digestion, and utter inability to undertake the study and practices of metaphysics." He stopped and looked about him as if to challenge us to think otherwise. "Master," said a young monk from some lesser lamasery, "surely if we drink when we eat, we dilute our gastric juices, or so I have been told." The young monk shut up abruptly and glanced about him as if confused by audacity. "A good question," said the Lama teacher. "Many people have that impression, but it's wrong. The body has the ability to put out a highly concentrated digestive juice, so concentrated, in fact, that under certain conditions, the digestive juices can start to digest the body." We gasped in amazement, and I felt considerable fright at the thought that I was eating myself. The teacher smiled as he saw the commotion he had caused. For a few moments more he kept silent, that the full impact should dawn upon us. "Gastric ulcers, stomach irritations, how are they caused?" he asked, gazing from one to another of us in the hopes of getting a reply. "Master," was my brash response, "when a man worries he gets ulcers, in much the same way as he might get a headache." The teacher smiled at me and replied, "Good attempt. Yes, a man worries. The gastric juices in his stomach become more and more concentrated until at last the weakest part of the stomach is attacked, and as the acids which normally digest food erode away the weakest part, eventually make a hole, twinges of pain churn the stomach contents and lead to further concentrations of the juices. At last the acids seep through the hole they've made and permeate between the layers of the stomach, causing what we know as gastric ulcers. An adequate supply of water would greatly alleviate the position and could even prevent ulcers. The moral? When you're worried, drink water and reduce the risk of getting ulcers." "Master," said a foolish boy, "I hope people do not heed this too much. I am one of those who have to carry water up the mountainside, and the work is hard enough now." Most people gave no thought to the problem of a country such as Tibet. We have plenty of water, most of it in the wrong place. To supply the needs of lamaseries such as the Patala and Shakpori, teams of worker monks and boys carried leather containers of water up the mountain paths. Laden horses and yaks also were used to transport the water necessary for our being. Endless teams of workers toiled to keep filled tanks, which were placed in accessible positions. We did not just turn on a tap and find a plentiful supply, hot or cold. Ours had to be dipped out of a tank. Very fine riverbed sand, also hauled up, was used for cleaning utensils and scouring floors. Water was precious. Our laundry was the river's edge. We took our clothes to the river instead of carrying the river up the mountain. The Lama teacher ignored the idiotic remark and continued. The worst ailment of mankind is, he paused for dramatic effect while we thought of plagues and cancers, constipation. Constipation causes more general ill health than any other complaint. It lays the foundation for more serious illnesses, makes one sluggish, bad-tempered, and miserably ill. Constipation can be cured. Once again he paused and looked about him. Not by massive doses of Cascara Sagrada, not by gallons of castor oil, but by drinking enough water. Consider, we eat, we take in food, and that has to progress through our stomach and through our intestines. In the latter, short hairs called villi, they are like hollow tubes, suck up nutriment from the digesting and digested food. If the food is too stodgy, too solid, it cannot enter the villi. It becomes impacted into hard lumps. The intestines should wriggle, as we may describe the action of peristalsis. This pushes the food along the alimentary canal, making room for more. But if the food is solid, peristalsis merely results in pain and no movement. So, water is very necessary to soften the mass. It is a sad fact that all medical students imagine that they have all the symptoms that they're studying. I pressed my abdomen. Yes, I was sure that I was just one hard mass. I must do something about it, I thought. Master, I inquired, how does an aperient work? The teacher's gaze turned on me. There was a smile in his eyes. I guessed that he had been watching most of us feel if we had hard masses. A person who has to have an aperient is a person already deficient in body water. He's constipated because he has insufficient fluid to soften impacted waste products. Water must be obtained, so an aperient first causes the body to pour water through the villi so that the mass is softened and rendered pliable. Then the peristaltic urge is strengthened. Pain is caused as caked lumps adhere to the inner surfaces, and the body is left dehydrated. One should always drink much water after taking an aperient. He smiled as he added, of course, for our water-carrying friend, let me say that the sufferers should lie by the bank of the river and drink deeply. Master, why do constipation sufferers have such bad skins and all those pimples? A boy with very bad skin asked that, and he blushed furiously as every head swiveled in his direction. We should get rid of our waste products in the way intended by nature, responded our teacher. But if man obstructs that method, then waste gets into the blood, clogging up the vital vessels, and the body tries to get rid of the waste through the pores of the skin. Again, the matter is not sufficient fluid to pass through the fine tubes of the pores, and clogging and dirty skin result. Drink a lot of water, do a reasonable amount of exercise, and we shall not have to pay so much for Cascara Sagrada, fig syrup, or castor oil. He laughed and said, now we will end this so that we can all rush out and lap up gallons of water. He waved his hand in a gesture of dismissal and was walking to the door when a messenger burst in. "Honorable Master, is there a boy Rampa? Tuesday, Lapsang Rampa, here, please?" The teacher looked round and crooked a finger to beckon me. "You, Lapsang, what have you done this time?" he inquired mildly. I reluctantly came forward, putting on my best and most pathetic limp, and wondering what more trouble there was. The messenger spoke to the Lama. "This boy has to go to the Lord Abbot at once. I have to take him. I do not know why." Oh, I thought, what can it be now? Could someone have seen me dropping sampa on the monks? Had someone seen me put salt in the Master of Acolyte's tea? Or, perhaps, gloomily my mind wandered over the various sins which I knew to be mine. What if the Lord Abbot knew several of my offences? The messenger led the way along the cold, bare corridors of Shakpuri. No luxury here, no ornate drapes as at the Patala. This was functional. At a door, guarded by 2 proctors, the messenger stopped and muttered, "Wait," before entering. I stood and fidgeted, shifting from foot to foot. The proctors gazed stonily at me as if I were some lesser form of human life. The messenger reappeared. "Go in," he commanded, and giving me a push. Reluctantly, I entered the door, which was pulled shut behind me, entered and involuntarily stopped in amazement. There was no austerity here. The Lord Abbot, clad in the richest vestments of red and gold, sat upon a platform raised about 3 feet off the floor. 4 lamas stood in attendance upon him. Recovering from my shock, I bowed in the prescribed manner, so fervently that my joints creaked and my bowl and charm box rattled in unison. Behind the Lord Abbot, a lama beckoned me forward, raising his hand when I reached the point at which I should stop. Silently, the Lord Abbot gazed at me, looking the whole length of me, observing my robe, my sandals, and presumably noting that I had my head well shaved. He turned to one of the attending lamas. This is the boy, eh?" "Yes, my lord," replied the lama to whom he addressed the question. Again that stare, that calculating appraisal. So, boy, you are he who brought aid to the monk Tengli." The lama who had signaled me before moved his lips and pointed to me. I got the idea. "I was so fortunate, my Lord Abbot," I replied with what I hoped was sufficient humility. Again that gaze, inspecting me as if I was some kind of bug on a leaf. At last he spoke again. Yeah, so you're to be commended, my boy, He gazed elsewhere, and the lama behind him signaled for me to bow and leave. So 3 more bows and a cautious retreat backwards, with a telepathic "thank you" to the lama who'd guided me by such clear signals. The door bumped my posterior. Gladly I fumbled behind me for the door fastening. I eased through and subsided against a wall with a phew of hearty relief. My eyes moved upwards to meet those of a giant proctor. "Well, are you going to the heavenly fields? Don't slump there, boy," he bellowed in my ear. Glumly, I hitched up my robe and moved down the corridor with the 2 proctors looking balefully at me. Somewhere a door creaked and a voice said, "Stop!" My goodness, by Buddha's tooth, what have I done now? I asked myself in despair as I halted and turned to see what it was all about. A lama was coming towards me, and good gracious, he was smiling. Then I recognized him as the Lama who had given me signals from behind the Lord Abbot's back. "You put on a good show, Lobsang," he murmured in a pleased whisper. "You did everything just as one should. Here's a present for you. The Lord Abbot likes them too." He thrust a pleasantly bulky package in my hands, patted me on the shoulder, and moved off. I stood as one stupefied, fingering the packet and guessing the contents. I looked up, and the two proctors were smiling benevolently upon me. They had heard the Lama's words. "Oh," I said as I looked at them. A proctor smiling was so unusual that it frightened me. Without more ado, I scurried as fast as I could out of that corridor. "What you got there, Lobsang?" piped a small voice. I looked around, and there was a boy who had recently been accepted. He was smaller than I, and he was having difficulty in settling down. "Eats, I think," I replied. "Oh, give us a taste. I miss my food," he said wistfully. I looked at him, and he did appear to be hungry. There was a storeroom off to the side. I led him in, and we sat at the far wall, behind some sacks of barley. Carefully, I opened the parcel and exposed the Indian food. "Oh," said the small boy, "I've never had food like that." I passed him one of the pink cakes, the one with the white stuff over it. He bit, and his eyes went rounder and rounder. Suddenly it dawned on me that I'd been holding the other cake in my left hand, but it was gone. A sound behind me made me turn, and there was one of the cats eating my cake and enjoying it. With a sigh of resignation, I dipped into the packet again and got myself a cake. "Rawr," said a voice behind me. A paw touched my arm. "Rawr, rawr," said the voice again, and then I turned to look. He had taken my second cake, and he was eating it. "Oh, you horrid thief!" I exclaimed crossly, and then I remembered how good these cats were, how they were friends of mine, and how they comforted me. "Ah, I'm sorry, Honorable Guardian Cat," I said contritely. "You work for your living, and I do not." I put my cake down and put my arms around the cat, who purred and purred and purred. "Oh," said the small boy, "they won't let me even touch them. How do you do that?" He stretched forth his hand and accidentally picked up another sugar cake. As I made no comment, he relaxed and sat back that he might eat in comfort. The cat purred on and butted me with his head. I held half a cake for him, but he'd had enough. He just purred even louder and rubbed the side of his face against it, spreading the gluey syrup all over his whiskers. Satisfied that I understood his thanks, he strolled away, jumped to the windowsill, and sat there washing in the warm sunlight. As I turned back from watching him, I observed the small boy pick up the cake which the cat had rubbed against, and crammed that into his mouth. "Do you believe in religion?" asked the small boy. Do I believe in religion? I thought. What a truly remarkable question. Here we were training to be medical lamas and Buddhist priests, and I'm asked, do I believe in religion? Crazy, I thought, crazy. Then I thought of it some more. Did I believe in religion? What did I believe in? "I didn't want to come here," said the small boy, "but they made me. I prayed to the Holy Mother Dolma. I prayed hard about not coming. Still I came. I prayed that my mother would not die, but she did die. And the disposers of the dead came and took her body and gave it to the vultures. I've never had a prayer answered. Have you, Lobsang? We sat there in the storeroom, leaning against the bags of barley. In the window the cat washed and washed, licked his forepaws, washed across the side of his face, licked the forepaw again, go over the top of the head, behind the ears, down again to the side of his face. It was almost hypnotic as he sat and licked and cleaned, licked and cleaned, licked and cleaned. Prayer. Well, now that I thought about it, prayer did not seem to work for me either. Then, if prayer did not work, why did we have to pray? I burned many sticks of incense, said the small boy humbly. Took them from Honorable Grandmother's special box, too, but prayers never worked for me. Look at me now, here at Chakpori, training to be something I don't want to be. Why do I have to be a monk when I have no interest in such things? I pursed up my lips, raised my eyebrows, and frowned, just as the Lord Abbot had recently done to me. Then I critically surveyed the small boy from head to foot. At last I said, "Tell you what, we will let the matter drop for the moment. I will think about it and let you know the answer in due course. My guide, the Lama Mingyar Dondap, knows everything, and I will ask him to take this matter under advisement." As I turned to scramble up, I saw the packet of Indian foods, now about half consumed. On an impulse, I gathered the wrapping into a bundle, with, of course, the food inside, and pushed it into the astounded small boy's arms. "Here," I said, "you have these. It will help you to think of other things than matters spiritual. Now you must go, because I have to think." I took him by the elbow and led him to the door and pushed him out. He was delighted to go, fearing that I should change my mind and want those Indian foods returned. With him out of the way, I turned to more important matters. On one of the sacks I had seen a beautiful piece of string. I went over to it and carefully teased it out of the neck of the sack. Then I went to the window, and the cat and I had a fine game, he chasing the end of the string, leaping over sacks, diving between them, and generally having much fun. At last he and I were tired almost simultaneously. He came out, butted me, and stood with his back legs tall and his tail straight in the air, saying, "Prrrr." He jumped up in the windowsill and disappeared on one of his mysterious journeys. I tucked the piece of cord in the front of my robe and sauntered off out through the door along the corridor until at last I reached my own room. For some time I stood facing the most important picture. It was of a male figure, and one could see inside. First there was the windpipe. On the left of the windpipe, a picture of two monks who were busy fanning air into the lungs. On the right side, two monks fanned air into the right side of the lungs. They were working quite hard too, I observed. Then there was a picture of the heart. Here, monks were busy pumping blood, or rather fluid, because one could not see that it was blood. Farther on, there was a large chamber which was the stomach. One monk, obviously a senior monk, sat behind a table, and there were 5 monks very busy bringing in bundles of food. The head monk was making a tally of the amount of food being brought in. Farther along, a group of monks were ladling bile from the gallbladder to dilute the food and to help in the matter of digestion. Yet further monks were busy in what was obviously a chemical factory, the liver. They were breaking down various substances with vats of acid. and I was quite fascinated looking at this picture, because then everything went along to coils and coils and coils, which were meant to represent the intestines. Monks were stuffing various substances into the intestines. Farther on, there were the kidneys, where monks were separating different fluids and seeing they were sent off in the right direction. But below, the bladder was the most interesting sight of all. 2 monks were sitting on opposite sides of a pipe, and they were obviously controlling the flow of fluid. Then my gaze went back to the face of the figure, and I thought, no wonder he looks so mournful, with all those people inside of him poking away at him, doing the most remarkable things to him. I stood there for some time in pleasant contemplation and fantasies concerning the little men inside. At last there was a light tap on the communicating door, and after a few moments it was opened, and I turned to see my guide, the Lama Mingyar Dondap, standing there. He smiled with approval as he saw me studying the figure. That is a very old figure indeed. It was made in its original form by great craftsmen of China. The original figure is exactly life-sized, and it was made out of veneers of different kinds of wood. I have seen the original, and it is truly lifelike. I understand that you made a good impression on the Lord Abbot, Lob sang. He told me just after that he thought you had remarkable potentialities. He added in a rather ironic voice. I was able to assure him that the inmost one was of the same opinion. My head was buzzing, thinking about religion, and so I humbly said, Master, can I ask you a question on a matter that has troubled me greatly? Most certainly you may. If I can help you, then I will help you. What troubles you? But come, let us move into my room, where we can sit comfortably and where we can have tea. He turned and led the way into his room, after a quick glance noticing that my small supply of food was becoming rapidly smaller. In his room he quickly sent for an attendant, and tea was placed before us. After we had finished our meal, the Lama smiled at me and said, Well, what is the trouble now? Take your time and tell me all about it, for you need not attend evening service. He sat back in the lotus position with his hands folded on his lap. I sat, or rather reclined, on my side and tried to sort out my thoughts so that I could make the matter as clear as possible without bumbling. Honorable Master, I said at last, I am troubled on the matter of religion. I cannot see the use of religion. I have prayed, and others have prayed, and nothing has come of our prayers. We seem to have been praying to a wilderness. It seems that the gods do not listen to prayers. It seems that, as this is the world of illusion, religion and prayer must be an illusion also. I also know that many pilgrims seek the aid of lamas, that their problems may be resolved, but I have never heard of any being resolved. My father, too, when I had a father, employed a priest full-time, but it does not seem to have been much good in our case. Master, can you, will you, tell me of any use in religion? My guide remained silent for a time, looking at his clasped hands. At last he heaved a sigh and looked straight at me. Lobsang, he said, religion is a very necessary thing indeed. It is absolutely necessary, absolutely essential, that there be religion which can impose spiritual discipline on its adherents. Without religion, people would be worse than wild animals. Without religion, there would be no voice of conscience. I say to you that it does not matter at all whether one be Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, or Jew. All men bleed red, and the faith to which they subscribe is, in its essentials, the same. He stopped and looked at me, trying to determine if I could follow what he was talking about, what he was meaning. I nodded, and he continued. Here upon earth, most people are very much like children in a school. Children who never see the head teacher, who never see the world outside the school. Imagine that the school building is completely enclosed by a high wall. There are certain teachers in the school, but the head ones are never seen by this particular class. The pupils at the school would then have some grounds for thinking that there was no head teacher if they had not the wits to see that there was something higher than the average teacher. As the children pass their examinations and are able to go to a higher grade of class, then they can move outside of the wall around the school and perhaps eventually meet the head teacher and see the world beyond. Too often, people demand proof. They must have proof of everything. They must have proof of God, and the only way to get proof is to be able to do astral traveling, to be able to do clairvoyance, because when one can travel beyond the confines of this classroom, which is walled in, one can see the greater truth beyond. Again he stopped and looked at me rather anxiously to see if I was following his remarks satisfactorily. Actually, I was, and I could see complete sense in what he was saying. Let us imagine that we have a classroom, and we believe our headmaster is called so-and-so, but there is another classroom near us, and we can meet those students. They argue with us, and they say that the headmaster's name is something else. But a third class, whom we can also meet, breaks in rather rudely and tells us we're all idiots, because there is no headmaster, because if there were, they should have met him or seen him if there were one, and there wouldn't be any doubt about his name. Now, Lobsang, smiled my guide, you will see that one classroom can be full of Hindus. They call their headmaster by one name. The next classroom full of Christians, and they call their headmaster by another name. But when we come right down to it, when we extract the essence of every religion, we find that everyone has common basic characteristics. It means that a God is there, a supreme being is there. We may worship him in many different ways, but so long as we worship him with belief, that is all that matters. The door opened, and a serving monk brought in some fresh tea. My guide gratefully poured some and drank, because he was thirsty with so much talking. And, well, I told myself that I had to have a drink as well, because I was thirsty with listening. One excuse was as good as another. Lobsang, suppose all the acolytes, monks and lamas at the Wild Rose Fence lamasery had no one responsible for their discipline. There are 7,000 inhabitants of that lamasery, 7,000 of them. Supposing there was no discipline, supposing there was no reward, no punishment, supposing every man there could do just as he wished without anything to bother his conscience, soon there'd be anarchy, there'd be murders, anything could happen. These men are kept in order by discipline, spiritual discipline as well as physical, but it is quite essential for all the peoples of the world to have a religion, for one must have spiritual discipline as well as physical discipline, because if there be physical discipline only, then it is a rule of force in which the strongest wins. But if there is a spiritual discipline, one has more of a rule of love. The world today greatly needs a return to religion. Not one particular religion, but any religion, the religion most suited to the temperament of the person concerned. I sat there, and I wondered about it all. I could see the sense of a discipline, but I wondered why we never got prayers answered. "Honorable Master," I asked, "that is all very well, but if religion is such a good thing for us, why is it that we do not get our prayers answered? I prayed that I would not have to come to this lamasery. But in spite of all my prayers, I had to come here. If religion is any good, why should I be sent here? Why weren't my prayers answered?" "Labsang, how do you know that your prayers were not answered? You have the wrong idea about prayer. Many people think that they just clasp their hands together and ask a mysterious God to grant them an advantage over their fellows. People pray for money. Sometimes people pray that an enemy be delivered into their hands. In war, opposing sides pray for victory. Opposing sides say that God is on their side and is ready to smite the enemy. You must remember that when one prays, one really prays to oneself. God is not a great figure which sits at some table listening to petitions in the form of prayers and handing out whatever it is that one asks for." He laughed as he continued, "Think of going to the Lord Abbot and telling him that you were praying that he would release you from the lamasery, or that he'd give you a great sum of money. Do you think he'd answer your requests in the way you wanted him to? He would more likely answer your request in the way you did not want him to." It made sense to me, but it did not seem much sense to keep on praying if there was no one there to answer or to grant things which one asked, and I said so. "But your idea of prayer, then, is an entirely selfish one. All you want all the time is something for yourself. Do you think you can pray to a God and ask him to send you a case of pickled walnuts? Do you think you can pray and have a great packet of Indian sweetmeats delivered to your arms? Prayer should be for the good of others. Prayer should be giving thanks unto God. Prayer should consist of a statement of what you want to do for others, not for yourself. When you pray, you make some power to your thoughts, and if possible or convenient, you should pray aloud, because that adds power to the thoughts. But you should make sure that your prayers are unselfish. You should make sure that your prayers do not contradict natural laws." I was nodding a bit with all that, because it did seem that prayers were not much good. My guide smiled at my apparent lack of attention, and he continued, "Yes, I know what you think. I know you think prayer is just a waste of time. But supposing a person had just died, or supposing a person had been dead for a few days, and you could have a prayer answered. Supposing you prayed that that person could be returned to life, do you think it would be good to have returned to life a person who's been dead for some time? People pray that God shall strike down someone who at the moment has displeased the person praying. Do you think it would be reasonable to expect that a God would go about just killing people because some wild and woolly person had prayed to that effect? But, Honorable Master, the Lamas all pray in unison in the temples, and they ask various things. Then what is the purpose of that?" The lamas pray in unison in the temples with special things in mind. They pray. They direct their thoughts. In other words, that they may assist those in distress. They pray that those who are weary may come for assistance, telepathic assistance. They pray that those who are wandering ghosts lost in the wilderness beyond this life come that they may be guided. For if a person dies knowing nothing about the other side of death, he or she may be lost in a morass of ignorance. Thus it is that lamas pray, sending out telepathic thoughts, that those who need help may come and be helped. He looked at me sternly and added, Lamas do not pray for their own advancement. They do not pray that they will be promoted. They do not pray that Lama so-and-so, who's been a bit difficult, shall fall off a rooftop or something. They pray only to help others. My ideas were getting a bit disjointed, because I had always thought that a god or the Blessed Mother Dolma would be able to answer a prayer if it was said with sufficient fervor. For example, I had not wanted to enter the lamasery, and I had prayed and prayed until my voice had almost given out. But no matter how much I had prayed, I still had to go to the lamasery. It seemed that praying was merely something which could possibly help other people. I perceive your thoughts exactly, and I do not altogether agree with your views on the matter, remarked my guide. If one is to be spiritual, one must do for others that which he would have done to him. You must pray that you have the strength and the wisdom to bring help or strength and wisdom to others. You should not pray for your own self-gain, for that is a waste and a useless exercise. Then, I asked, a religion is merely something we've got to do for others? Not at all, Lobsang. A religion is something which we live. It's a standard of conduct which we willingly impose on ourselves so that our over-selves may be purified and strengthened. By keeping pure thoughts, we keep out impure thoughts. We strengthen that with which we return when we leave the body. But when you are more proficient in astral traveling, you'll be able to see the truth for yourself. For the present, for a few more weeks, you must accept my word. Religion is very real. Religion is very necessary. If you pray and your prayer is not answered as you think, it may be that your prayer was answered after all because, before we come to this earth, we make a definite plan of what advantages and disadvantages we're going to have on this earth. We plan our life on earth before we come here, just as a student in a great college plans his course of studies, so that at the end of those studies he may be this or that or something else, that for which he trained. Do you think that any one religion is superior to another, Honorable Master? I asked rather timidly. No religion is better than the man who professes that religion. Here we have our Buddhist monks. Some Buddhist monks are very good living men, and others are not so good. A religion is personal to each person. Each person has a different approach to a religion. Each person sees different things in his religion. It does not matter if a man is a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Jew, or Christian. All that matters is that a person should practice his religion to the best of his belief and to the best of his ability. Master, I asked again, is it right for a person to change his religion? Is it right for a Buddhist to become a Christian, or a Christian to become a Buddhist? My own personal opinion, Lobsang, is that except in very unusual circumstances, a person should not change his religion. If a person was born to the Christian faith and lives in the Western world, then that person should keep the Christian faith, because one absorbs religious beliefs as one absorbs the first sounds of one's language, and it often happens that if a person who was a Christian suddenly becomes a Hindu or a Buddhist, then certain hereditary factors, certain inbred conditions, tend to weaken one's acceptance of the new faith, and all too often, to compensate for that, one will be avidly, fanatically in favor of its new religion, while at the same time having all sorts of unresolved doubts and conflicts beneath the surface. The result is rarely satisfactory. My own recommendation is that, as a person is born, so he has accepted a religious belief, and thus he should keep to that belief. I mused. Then it seems that my ideas about religion have all been back to front. It seems that one has to give and not ask for anything. One has to hope instead that someone will ask on one's behalf. One can ask for understanding. One can ask in prayer that one shall be able to assist another, because through assisting others, one learns oneself. In teaching others, one learns oneself. In saving others, one saves oneself. One has to give before one can receive. One has to give of oneself, give of one's compassion, mercy. Until one is able to give of oneself, one is not able to receive from others. One cannot obtain mercy without first showing mercy. One cannot obtain understanding without first having given understanding to the problems of others. Religion is a very big thing, Lobsang, too big to be dealt with in just one short talk like this. But think about it. Think what you can do for others. Think how you can bring pleasure and spiritual advancement to others. And let me ask you something, Lobsang. You were instrumental in saving the life of a poor old monk who had had an accident. If you face it squarely, you'll find that you derived pleasure and high satisfaction from that act. Isn't that so? I thought about that, and yes, it was quite true. I had a lot of satisfaction from going down there after Honorable Puss, and then bringing help to the old man. Yes, Honorable Lama, you are correct. I had much satisfaction, I said at last. The evening shadows were falling, and the purple mantle of night was gradually spreading across our valley. In far-off Lhasa, the lights were beginning to twinkle and people were beginning to move behind their oil silk screens. Somewhere below our window, one of the cats gave a plaintive cry, which was answered by another cat's voice from close at hand. My guide stood up and stretched. He appeared to be stiff, and when I scrambled to my feet, I nearly fell on my face, because we'd been sitting talking for longer than I had thought. And yes, I was stiff too. Together we looked out the window for a few moments, and then my guide said, "It might be a good idea to have a good night's rest, because who knows, we may be busy on the morrow. Good night to you, Lobsang. Good night." "Honorable Master," I said, "thank you for the time and trouble you have taken explaining this to me. I am slow and I suppose sluggish in my mind, but I'm beginning to get a little understanding. Thank you. Good night." I bowed to him and turned and walked to the communicating door. "Lobsang," my guide called to me. I turned and faced him. The Lord Abbot really was pleased with you, and that is a matter which should go on record. The Lord Abbot is an austere, stern man. You have done well. Good night." "Good night," I said, again as I turned to my room. Quickly I made my very simple preparations for the night, and then I lay down. Not to sleep immediately, but to think of all the things which I'd been told. And as I thought about it, yes, it was true. Correct adherence to one's religion could provide most adequate and excellent spiritual discipline. End of chapter 13.